Good morning, good moed. Thanks to each and every one of you for joining. Chapter 9, verse 7. Chapter 9, verse 7. We read this pasuk last time we met, but we didn't really give answers to it. Vayomer Moshe el Aaron. Moshe said to Aaron, "Rav al Mizbeach." Come close. This is on the 8th day of the dedication of the Mishkan, which is, there seemed to have been a week of sort of general Mishkan inauguration type things. And this seems to be sort of the beginning of the regular service, though this was clearly a unique day. And Moshe was sort of the primary Kohen in the 7 days. And now Aaron is going to be the primary Kohen. So Moshe says to Aaron, come close to the altar and bring your sin offering and your Ola offering. Atone for yourself and the people. Do the sacrifice of the people and atone for them as God instructed. So we posed 2 questions. One was, why? What does Moshe mean when he tells Aaron to come close? Like Moshe, for the same price, could have just said, "Bring your offerings," and obviously he has to walk up to the altar to bring his offerings. The other thing is when it talks about bringing Aaron's offering, it says, atone for yourself and for the people. And then it talks about the people's offering and it says atone for the people. So it would have made sense, presumably, to say your offering will atone for yourself, the people's offering will atone for the people. But the people's atonement shows up in both sets. That's a little strange too. Let's start with the Ramban. First Ramban on Pasuk Zayin. V'tam krav el ha-mizbeach v'yikrav Aaron el ha-mizbeach v'yishchat. Al dati b'derech hapshat yomer krav el tzfon ha-mizbeach v'asei sham achat asvia ola keim shchitasam b'tzafon v'yom Moshe keim b'derech ktsara shekvar yada Aaron zeh. So actually the first pshat the Ramban says is what he means when he says come close to the altar, is he's clarifying for him what corner of the altar he should go to. So it's not that it means you should go to the altar because he would have thought he's not supposed to go to the altar. What it means is presumably, I guess, the corner that was closest to where Aaron was standing was the northern corner, I suppose. And what he's saying, the northern side, and he's saying to him, come close, meaning that the closest spot to you is the side on which these offerings are supposed to be brought. There were all these halachos about which corner of the altar is supposed to be used for which offering. But in the Medrash, rabbis are very much engaged in this. They gave a parable. Let's say a king would marry a woman and she felt unworthy to be married to royalty. So her sister comes in, Amrullah, and the sister says to the new queen, Achosi, what was the idea of getting married in the first place? Wasn't it to have a relationship with the king? Hagisi datich is sort of like, pick yourself up, think of yourself highly, and go interface with the king. So the Medrash says this is the mashal of what Moshe says to Aaron. Aaron achi, lama nivcharta lios kohen gadol. So Moshe says to Aaron, why do you think you were chosen to be the high priest? It wasn't, it wasn't so you would sit at home and agonize over what you should do. You were chosen to be the high priest to bring offerings before God. Hagas datcha, be a little haughty, ubo vavod avodascha, and come and do your service. So that Moshe had to encourage Aaron to step forward. Yesh omrim, Aaron roas ha-mizbeach ketav nishur, v'yom mimenu. And some say that the pshat is that it wasn't just this general thing that Aaron thought he wasn't worthy, but that Aaron saw the altar and it appeared to him like a bull, and he was afraid. Nichlas Moshe atzlo, Moshe came into him. Amar lo, Aaron achi, lo tira mata ha-mizyari. So Moshe comes into Aaron and says, don't be afraid. Again, think highly of yourself and bring the offering. So whereas the first pshat the Ramban said it had to do with what side of the altar Aaron should go to, now the pshat based on the Medrash is Moshe's encouraging him to go, and that he needs encouragement. And he followed through on that encouragement. What's this Medrash about anyway? What's this whole mashal about? Ki bavur shoya Aaron kadosh Hashem. Vein benafsho chet zulasi maseh ha'egel. Aaron was a very holy Jew and a very devoted servant of God, and he really didn't have sins on his record, except for one biggie, the sin of the golden calf. This sin was very set in his mind. Aaron says, my sin is, not Aaron, sorry, the Pasuk in Tehillim, David says, my sin is always opposite me. In other words, the devotion, the attitude of a true servant of God is when one does err, it's not a minor thing, it's a big deal. So now if you think about it in that light, the Medrash is shocking, I mean, really striking. So Aaron looked at the altar and he sees an image of a bull, and that's supposed to represent the golden calf. And in other words, how can I'm gonna bring atonement for the Jewish people, for myself, for the Jewish people. How is it possible? Thinking about the golden calf. And therefore Moshe says to Aaron, you have to be a little haughty here. Don't be so humble. God has chosen you. God has said you're supposed to be the Kohen Gadol, despite what you did. Aaron achi afapishet nisrat zamakim lechaper emusecha tzarich atalitin to piv shel satan shami estimcha b'biascha l'mikdash. And it's an interesting thing to think about. There are those who say, I mean, this is obviously doesn't take a lot of creativity to say this, but just interesting to reflect on. There are those who say that the Satan showed Aaron this image. In other words, this is the Yetzer Hara. This is an amazing mashal for a lot of things in life, that we have a way of beating up on ourselves. And that Aaron's reluctance, on the one hand, Aaron's reluctance seems to be a wonderful thing because it shows humility and it shows diligence in serving God correctly. But Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to him, you have a mission in life. And if you just sit around thinking about all of your shortcomings and all of your mistakes, you're never going to actualize your mission. And so it's an interesting, and therefore that's what he's saying to Aaron, come close. Okay, let's go on to the Orach Chaim on Pasuk Zayin. Atone for yourself and the people. Mashma ki kaparas Aaron nogas gam la'am. What it sounds like in the pasuk when it talks about the offerings of Aaron, atone for yourself and the people, is that through Aaron atoning for himself, that somehow impacts the people as well. V'atamhu letzad kichat Aaron Yisrael hayulo siba lachto. Why did Aaron sin? Aaron sinned. Aaron has his own responsibility here, but the Jews pushed him into the sin of the golden calf. First, the golden calf wasn't his idea. She'amrulo, they said to him, "Kuma seilanu, God, get up, make for us a god." B'chol od shelo niskaper Aaron yeshno achet lo osehu l'mesavev osehu. In other words, what the Orach Chaim is saying is, if Aaron's sin is still hanging over Aaron, then, like, if that account is still open, so to say, it's not only about who committed the sin, and that's Aaron, but it's also about the person or people who pushed him into it, who influenced him. I want to emphasize that doesn't mean that Aaron's innocent. Aaron has his own responsibilities, but they also bear responsibility. So it's very interesting. The Orach Chaim is saying that if Aaron atones for his own sin, that also kind of takes the yoke off of the people a little bit. It's an interesting thing to think about. And let's just jump over to the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Zayin. In mine, it's the third paragraph of the Kli Yakar, probably around 60-70% of the way through the piece, beginning with V'yesh Omrim. V'yesh Omrim, there are those who say, She'Aaron lo hayatzarech kapara. There are those who say that Aaron did not need atonement. Ki malchet hamaseh v'lo achet hahirur, k'mavur l'mala b'pasuk kach l'cha egel. So what did Aaron need atonement for vis-a-vis the golden calf? There's action and there's thought. Were Aaron's intentions bad? Aaron's intentions weren't bad. Aaron wasn't trying to do idol worship. Aaron just thought this was the best way to stall the people. So Aaron's intentions weren't bad, but Aaron's actions were bad. The people needed atonement on both fronts. The people needed atonement on the intentions, those people who had intentions towards Avodah Zarah, but they also needed atonement on whatever they did in terms of bowing to the bowing to the golden calf, etc. Lefichach nema b'kaparas Aaron v'chapir ba'atchova ad ha'am. Lomerlach shagam ha'am tzarich el kaparascha al chet hamaseh. Aaron's atonement is for his actions. So Moshe says to Aaron, you need to atone for your actions, but the people need to connect to that atonement as well, because there were people who were guilty of an inappropriate deed. But when it comes to the atonement for the people, that was the unique atonement for the people was based on thought. Aaron has nothing to do with that. Aaron doesn't need an atonement for that. Aaron lo yitzarich l'chapar al ha'hirur ki lo chata b'machshava klal ki im b'maseh u'bli safek shlo niskaving l'shem elokus. So the way the Kli Yakar looks at the pasuk is Aaron's offering is as an atonement for the action. So Moshe says to Aaron, the people need to link into your atonement as well. But the people's offering is an atonement for thought. And that has nothing to do with Aaron's. That's just about the people. Okay, let's go on to verse 22. Verse 22. Vayisa Aaron es yadav el ha'am vayvorchem. After all of the offerings are brought, Aaron raises his hands towards the people and blesses them. Vayered me'asos hachatos v'ha'olav hashlamim. And Aaron stepped down from bringing the various offerings. What was the blessing that he said to them? It just says Aaron blessed them. What was the blessing? Ramban and Pasuk Chaf Beis. Vayisa Aaron es yadav el ha'am vayvorchem. So he starts off by quoting Rashi, Birkas Kohanim. He gave them Birkas Kohanim. He's the Kohen Gadol. Yivarechacha Yo'er Yisa Lashon Rashi. Birkas Kohanim. Now, what's tough about that is Birkas Kohanim isn't introduced until the next book of Chumash. So, how does this work exactly? So Ramban says, "V'im kain tia parshas daber el Aaron v'yalbanav lemor kosavar kos b'nei Yisrael shebechumash abkudim mukdamas lazeh." The Ramban says, if you say that Aaron did Birchas Kohanim, it must be that the psukim in Parshas Nasa about Birchas Kohanim, in the actual storyline, in the chronology, precede this section. Which, of course, we know that not everything in the Torah is written in chronological order. That's what the Ramban says. By the way, says the Ramban, it makes a lot of sense to say that what's written over there in Parshas Naso happened much earlier, because the section over there talks about the day that Moshe finished standing up the Mishkan, which that's before this Parsha, right? So already part of that over there is out of order. Yitachin lomar Aaron Peras Kapav Hashamayim Uveirach Esa'am Kasher Asa Shlomo. It could be that he just spread his hands out towards the heavens and blessed the people, like Shlomo Melech does when the Beis Hamikdash is completed. Shneimar Vayamot Shlomo Lefnei Mizbeach Hashem Vayfros Kapav Hashamayim. V'sham Nemar Vayamot Vayvorach Kol Kal Yisrael Kol Gadol Limor. V'lefichach L'Hiskar Kasav Shetzivo So Moshe Lasos came. So the other pshat the Ramban says is maybe he didn't say Birchas Kohanim. Maybe he just said a nice blessing to the people. That's an interesting technical question. Okay, so we discussed this morning the idea as to why it says that Moshe told Aaron to come close. We discussed the Rakaim and the Kli Yakar as to why it talks about the atonement of the nation in Aaron's offering as well as the people's offering. Okay.